Right.
you know?
Yeah.
I knew how to take somebody in.
Yeah. Yeah. So was that when you would perform, was eye contact really important to you? Because it really varies from person to person. Was that something you felt comfortable with?
I felt so comfortable with it because until I couldn't do it anymore, and that's another thing. But that was the way in which I communicated on stage for most of my time dancing. Because I was always really after this soulful connection. I was always after
Interesting.
something else, even if that something else was kind of like covered in beast and mess and muck.
Yeah. So that actually brings me to the point. One of the things that really moved me while watching your play is the compassionate experiences that you had with some of your regulars or just random customers. And it's something that I think a lot of people don't realize, like how much of our work and time as strippers and sex workers is spent comforting others that are either going through a hard time or feel like an outcast if they reveal their true identity or true desires. And we spend so much time talking and listening to and comforting and holding them. Sometimes they just want to be held. And that happened in your play with one particular customer where he literally wanted you to hold him and he cried. And then the other one that really moved me was the one that you call Bernie, I think that's
Burned man.
Burned man, yeah, because he lost everything. He lost his house, he lost his wife, and it's probably really hard for him to find connection. And all he wanted during your lap dances with you was to really feel connected with another person and with a woman specifically because he's missing being next to a woman. Can you talk about those two experiences specifically and what those were like for you and also about the misconceptions surrounding like what we do as far as with our clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and just giving it also a little more context. So,
Thanks.
in the play, I play 12 different characters. I play the women that I danced with, the men that I danced for. I play, the guy that I was in the relationship with.
Right.
I play myself and him in scenes. I go back and forth.
One woman show.
Yeah, one woman show.
Yeah.
So get that. And it's like, right?
It's absolutely, first of all, I just want to interrupt you. Your work is absolutely stunning and incredible. Like the amount of talent and skill that goes into what you did was just mind blowing. So, and I'm sure you've heard that time and time again. So,
thank you so much.
yeah, if you ever get a chance to see this play, it's literally like I did feel like there were all those different characters on stage, even though it was you playing them.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Of course.
And so, one of the ways in excavating this time period was really pulling out those experiences that, I mean, literally, and as I was driving here today, I thought to myself, I feel like just yesterday, it was like just yesterday with some of these experiences because they are so ingrained in my heart. And it's almost like they're never going to leave and they're just there and I'm just okay with it. And it's just the way that it is. And Burned Man is one of them. And so there was this guy, his name was Rob, but we called him Burned Man. And half of his body was burned and his face, as I say in the play, looked like it was melted to one side. And the other side of his face was incredibly handsome. And he was like 7 feet tall and he would come stumbling into the club drunk. It was a nude club. We didn't have alcohol. So he came with, little bottles in his pockets and you know what I mean?
Yes, I know what you mean.
And he would sit there and he would call me Spring, even though my name was Autumn. And he would continue to tell me the same story over again. And the story was that he fell asleep with a cigarette in his mouth, and that cigarette dropped and basically slowly burned his entire house down. I don't know if it was a smoke inhalation or what it was, but ultimately his wife died in the fire, and he barely survived. And he was riddled with guilt and grief.
Yeah.
And it was as if in that moment his life stopped.
Yeah.
And he came every night and he would sit onto this couch and his arms would expand just huge, like almost the whole sides of the couch they would take over. And all he wanted to do was just tell this story over again and have someone hear it. Maybe if he told it this time,
it would turn out different, maybe.
It would turn out different.
Yeah.
And he would close his eyes and he would smell me and he would smell whoever it was that was dancing for him. And it was like, in that moment, it was like, he's not a customer and I'm not a dancer. And we're just these two human beings that are looking for some kind of reprieve and some kind of like moment where we can just be without all of the fucking shit that's on our backs and surrounds us that keeps us from fucking being free.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And one time, in fact, Burned Man, I was in the kitchen. Anyway, we lived at the club in Alaska, so we lived downstairs. And then we went upstairs, you know, my friend and I went upstairs after work, and it's confusing, but there was a kitchen in the back and we were making tofu burritos and blah, blah, blah. And Shannon tells me to go get a knife in the bar and the lights are off and I'm searching for the light and I turn it on and I scream because Burn Man is on the couch. And it's closed already. It's like, it's not his time to be there. And I'm like, and I call out, you know, Raven. And she comes in with a fucking, like, the other knife that she was cutting the onions with. And she's like, what the fuck? Anyway, he had fallen asleep in the men's stall.
Okay.
In the corner of the men's stall. He told us later, and the security guard didn't find him. And it was almost like he felt like he was home.
Yeah.
And we carried him to his truck, and it was super snowing, it was super snowy and freezing, and we carried him to his truck, and we had somebody come and drive him home, and it was just like, yeah, man, I don't know whatever happened to that guy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I know a lot of people like that I look back on fondly, and I'm like, what happened to Uncle Lou, you know? And so, like, yeah, there are some customers that over time we would, like, consider them an older uncle or, you know, a long lost cousin, older cousin, or like they become like your family or these people that you really care about, like you're like your distant family, you know. And so I knew a guy named Uncle Lou. He's much older, and he would fly us to Vegas and give us free hotel rooms because he gambled all the time. And all he wanted to do was have buffet dinners with us. And then we would just do our own thing the whole rest of the day and the whole rest of the night because he would gamble. And he just wanted to have buffet meals with us.
Yes.
So he wasn't alone. And that was it. There was nothing ever weird. We never stayed in the room with him. And not that, you know, any other type of sex work would have been weird, but it wasn't that way. It was the sex work we did with him was just to spend time with him and just be near him. And I think that's where people get confused. Like, sex work isn't all about actually having sex.
Right.
It's about being with the other sex and providing comfort and companionship. I spent about 80% of my career talking with and just being with people. And then obviously lap dancing. And then there's something else that happened in your play where you basically called one of the dancers dirty dancers, and then so that's when we talk about dirty dancers, which is something that I particularly, you know, I become more woke to over time. I used to use that term a lot as well. Those were during my whorephobic days. But then I myself was starting to evolve and starting to feel more comfortable doing extras with certain people. And I noticed that you had like a similar situation where you're like, oh, she's dirty. And then the next thing you know, you're shoving your nipple in someone's mouth and you're like, oh, what's that say about me?
That's right.
Yeah, I've done that plenty of times, shove my nipple in people's mouth because like I liked it. Like, well, I wanted to do it.
A part of that, and a part of the reason that is in the show is for that very reason, which is the show Naked in Alaska is not to say this is bad, this is good, this is the way, this isn't the way. It's to bring the things in which I kept hidden and to put them into the light for everybody to see.
Right.
And so at the time, it's the consciousness of myself at the time when I was working in these clubs and I was acting as if I was up here, I was at this higher place, and these people were down here. And then what happens is that paradigm switches in an instant.
Yeah.
And then there I am. And then what does that mean? And that's just even like that's just like a micro of how that shit happens all the time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's like wanting you to see that 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 this is how I judged her, and then wanting you to see this is exactly how I did exactly what she did too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that there's no shame in either one. So, like, when I look back and think about how I spoke of other dancers and that I've grown and developed over time,
Yeah.
I don't like to shame my older self. That was just education. That was about overcoming ignorance. Um, and looking back on my behavior with certain customers, there's no shame in that either. And we spend so much time, especially as women, being told that if you have too much sex or spread whatever around, that you're a whore and then that's bad, and that you're lesser than. Whereas when men do it, it's like celebrated and, oh, he's a stud, you know? And so I think it's really important for people to understand that, like, just because we're women, we can do whatever we choose with our bodies, and why even be judged for that? Why?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. And then as women, why judge other women for what they choose to do? You know? A lot of people have asked me in the past too, like, oh, did you like do X, Y, and Z with customers, or did you ever like get off? And I'm like, yeah, yes, because they're people,
Yeah.
and I'm a person, and I'm pretending like I'm sexually turned on, and eventually I'm gonna start to believe it, or maybe I will be turned on. You know?
Yeah, it's that there's, everything is gray. It's often not a very rarely is it a black and white. Sometimes it is, but most of the time
Right.
it's gray.
Yeah.
And Naked in Alaska takes place, by the way, before pole dancing was a trend, before Me Too movement, before there was even in the kind of like mainstream culture, like
Right.
this kind of talk about what it means to be a sex worker, or
Right.
a lot of things are being brought to the forefront, which is amazing. But this show talks about a time before all of that.